and we won't look any different as far as the eye is concerned, so I'm concerned that none of this matters. Then again, do we matter? Nothing but this miraculous accumulation of matter, miraculous organization of matter, seeing matter, being matter, breathing matter. We can't actually make matter, but we can make matter matter. We can turn matter into things that matter. We can give matter value.
Have you ever tried to express something that it's so clear in your head, and when it comes out, you just can't seem to get it to land with the audience or the person you're talking to, wherever the message is intended for? And so today's conversation is really about that act of creation, the act of storytelling, the act of poetry. Like, how do we use words to move people? Our guest is someone that is an absolute master at using words to move people. In fact, that's his platform, Words That Move. So check this one out if you're someone who feels like you have a desire to express more clearly or with more power and intention. And I hope you enjoy the episode. Hey guys, I'm here with someone who is celebrated by Forbes as one of the year's best storytellers. He's also an acclaimed poet and filmmaker whose profound and hilarious, relatable work has captivated audiences worldwide. He's got films viewed by millions across 5 continents and translated into 15 languages. And he offers a unique blend of humor and depth, including his pioneering stand-up poetry special. He's also the founder and CEO of Social Awakening, an organization dedicated to helping young people survive and thrive in the age of social media. Please welcome my friend Max Stossel, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's, I actually forgot how we had originally connected until you told me last time we saw each other, where we were playing in a music room at Summit Series. And I think you were on the drums, and I don't know what I was doing. I was probably making some ridiculous noise, but it was like one of those moments where it's like, I don't know you, but I know you. Like, as soon as we connected in that capacity, I'm like, you're already a friend.
Totally. Yeah, it felt, that room for me on that boat, this was one of the Summit at Sea adventures, was like a respite and was a really just overwhelming energy outside of that room for me. And so being there, playing music, jamming with you felt really good. I'm pretty sure you were on the guitar. And it was just like, yeah, this room feels good and creative and fun in what outside felt really intense. And so I was very happy to be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was for me. Is a lot of people are like, oh, that must be really... It must take a lot of energy to be up and, in front of a couple people playing music. I'm like, no, quite the opposite. When I'm in that space, I know what to say next. I know what to do next. It's just random conversations that I find really difficult.
Absolutely, especially in an environment like that where there's so many people with so many different intentions and energies. And there's a lot of like unspoken, hard to name things in that room and environment too. And it's just like all mixed in together in a cocktail. And I find in my own life, I can be uncomfortable when I do not I can be uncomfortable if I feel like there's a lot of unnamed stuff happening that like is just there and driving things that isn't named. And when that can be so much in volume, I'm like, I'm just out of here. I'm going to go play some music.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there'll be more fun times for us to play music again. That was a very cool way to connect. And with that kind of going to my opening question, when you were little, what did you dream you'd be when you grew up?
A professional soccer player. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I was soccer obsessed my whole childhood. I was really good from like 5 to 10. And then I didn't hit puberty until like, I don't know, 16, 25, something like that. And so I like when everyone else grew and I didn't, I was not able to keep up my soccer dominance. And it was also my pattern as a child that if I was not really great at it, I didn't like it as much. So then as I wasn't as good, it was frustrating for me. But I did stick with that. I played college soccer, but after college, that was, even in college, it was clear I wasn't going to be a professional soccer player. And afterwards, it was it was a life shift that I think was ultimately very good for me.
What was it about soccer originally that really drew you to it?
I think, if I'm being honest, it was just like, I liked it when I was really little, kicking a ball around, and then I felt good at it, and I liked that I was good at it. And then as it progressed, I loved to compete. Like, I loved winning. Like, I really wanted to win. I loved winning, and then not even just winning, I loved dominating. I wanted to win at every facet, in every element. Like, I wanted there to never be any moment that I was not winning certain games, and soccer was one area where I could really do that and just like maybe take control of my surroundings by being really good at this game. But yeah, I did love it when I was young.
And what kind of winner are you? Are you a gracious winner?
I've learned to be a gracious winner because when I was, as a child, I think probably more authentically, a screaming in your face, hell yeah, let's go winner. I found that did not elicit a reaction in people that I wanted or was willing to tolerate. And so I learned to be much more humble and gracious about it. But yeah, as a child, no, was not a gracious winner or loser. I was very intense about both.
Does any of that show up? I mean, obviously the thing or we're talking about is a lot of storytelling today, and maybe it takes a different turn, but does any of that competitive nature that like, I want to win so hard, does that show up in any of your aspect of storytelling poetry?
I don't think the winning part does. I think what might is a similar part of me that wants like every step along the journey of the story to be like so communicated and so right. Like sort of I could translate that into a perfectionism of sorts, where it's like, I don't just want the story overall to be good. I want like every step along the way for it to be just like wonderful, you to be with me, to be exactly as it's meant to help ultimately deliver something beautiful, which is the idea and point of a lot of the stories, something meaningful, something beautiful, something relatable.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it so the other night when we were together, I guess it was a couple months ago, and you did some off the cuff poetry. It was interesting to know so many people in the room said, I don't like poetry. The thought of watching people do poetry makes me want to hurt myself. But they were on the edge of their seat with every single line that you said. It was so interesting to watch. And I could feel it. I was like, there's something, the way that you captivate people line to line to line is something that I've rarely ever heard. And it truly, these are asshole New Yorkers they're judgmental about everything. You'd be like, how was this restaurant? They're like, it was okay. It's like, that's a top world class restaurant. But like, it was very cool to see the way that was held. So I am wondering, like, how did you find your way to that? What was that process of getting to that point of being able to just really get down to the line to line to line?
Yeah, I think that was, so a couple things. One, that's pretty common, I think. When people hear, he's a poet, or I'm about to hear poetry, it's like, I think we also conjure up this idea maybe of what we were exposed to at a young age, or like often very like intensely flowery, complicated language that is like hard. I got a C in high school poetry personally. I think we imagine something very like challenging and very intense and complicated and very descriptive and flowery, often for flowery's sake. And yeah, what I do, I don't think it certainly isn't that. And so I think there's often just like a mismatched expectation, and depending on people's preferences, some people love exactly that kind of poetry I just described. And for me, it's more about communication. It's like I want to playfully and beautifully deliver a beautiful communication. And that often happens to rhyme and have rhythm, which are natural skills of mine. And it started for me when I heard a poet perform, in Q, who you might know from Similar Worlds. And yeah, he just shared a poem, and like my arms were buzzing like on the way home. I was like, what is happening? Why are my arms buzzing? That had never happened like that before. And I just started like writing on a notepad on my phone, trying to figure out like what's going on here. And the first two lines of what I wrote rhymed. And I was like, no, okay, let's see if I can do this. And I finished that poem, and then like saw him a couple days later, and I said, hey, I wrote a poem after your poem. Like, do you want to hear it? And I think he probably gets that a lot. He was kind of like, okay. And I shared it for him, and he was moved, like, you should consider pursuing this. And I liked being good at things, and his approval meant a lot to me at that time. And so I would now and then, just like often on the train in New York City, write. And it became this really beautiful way of where I could feel more seen and heard and felt. And I felt like I could deliver important messages in a way that really landed with people. And it helped me start to come into my own, just like as a human in so many ways. And it's been a beautiful and magnificent part of my life, and has blossomed into this career. And yeah, I love it. It feels so deeply tied to my heart and soul.
How old were you at that moment when you wrote that first piece and shared it with InQ?
I think I was 23. So that was about 11 years ago.
Yeah, I would have just assumed that you've been doing this since you were a little kid. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, that's so natural, like that you're such a natural at it. Yeah, I'm really surprised to hear that. That's really cool.
I was a little kid.
Yeah, that's fair too. Fair enough. Especially with the whole late blooming if you didn't hit puberty till 25. So
yeah, you know.
So how do you identify yourself as an artist? Do you call yourself a storyteller? Is there another way that you do kind of acknowledge what you are, what you do?
I like the word storyteller. I've more embraced the word poet, despite the distinction that we just sort of talked about. I like the word artist itself. That is the one that I most relate to. And anyone who considers themselves an artist, I often have a lot in common with or relate to in ways that feel really good. It feels like we're looking at the world in a similar way. We really deeply value expression and beauty and love. Like, artist seems to encapsulate that quality, and that quality is important to me.
So when you're creating art, telling stories, creating poetry, how much are you thinking about the person that you're creating for versus yourself?
When I started, I was thinking like huge amounts for the person I was creating for. It felt like if they did not get it, if they did not receive this package that I was creating and delivering for them, then it was a failure. Like, that was how it felt. If this does not land, then it's no good. Over the years, I've become more comfortable just like letting expression happen, and then those who it's meant to land to, it will land to, and not caring as much about that outside approval or listener. I still like that feeling of like when things land, and so especially if I'm starting to really love a piece itself, then I will want to do things to make sure it's really communicating. And the things I think that I'm working on another show right now, and it's like about God and psychedelics and death and love, and those are concepts that I think it can be really easy to, like, especially around the God concept and psychedelics concepts, the words fall short. It can be very hard to communicate. And so I am fired up by the idea of being able to like communicate these ideas in some ways, like, to my parents, like to people who do not have experience with psychedelics and do not really have much of belief or like understanding of God, or what I would call God. And so being able to communicate that to someone who doesn't really play in those worlds, that feels exciting for me right now. So I am interested in that. And there's also there's sort of like an art of like disappearing for like 5-ish minutes that I think is a really beautiful thing. Like, it's like metaphorically, like there's like something downstairs, that like we're all waiting for to get.
So you said something before that, I think a lot about this is, why does it matter to be heard? Like, I heard you say that, like, you felt like you were heard when you started to write poetry. It's like, oh, people are getting the message. Why does it matter to you?
I think there's like one of my favorite things is, I'm actually going to zoom out before I get into that. Language, as much as it is my tool, is very far removed from like communication of the same essence or experience. Like, it's pretty far. I'm having my experience of the world that goes into thoughts. Those thoughts turn into words, like thoughts and emotions. I kind of mix them up and turn them into words, and then I share that with you. It kind of feels like translating something through Google Translate a bunch of different times, and then you get the 3 times removed thing. That's what we're communicating with language. I love that. One of my favorite things is the moments where it really feels like we're looking at the same thing together, like we're as close as can be to having like a very similar human experience, or really seeing and really understanding each other. That to me is a deep sense of connection and intimacy, and like a combatant to a sort of existential loneliness, I would say, where I feel like, we're really in this together. And I really value togetherness. And there's something about really feeling heard or really feeling seen where I'm like, I'm understood or accepted, and like we're together in this. That feels really meaningful and important for me. And I've certainly found that in my own life. And then for others, like, it does seem to be tremendously relaxing for people to feel like they can be seen and heard without being judged, like seen and heard and loved and accepted at the same time. It feels like a really deep, beautiful intimacy and acceptance.
That's very well articulated, and in a very meta sense. I imagine a lot of the people that listen to this struggle from something, which is that even if they can articulate it as clearly as they've experienced it, their life experience is so different. Whether it's people running businesses, anybody who lives in New York is pretty much unrelatable to the rest of the world in some way, shape, or form. So many of us just have all this privilege and this inability to just be around people from other cultures and necessarily like know how to connect in that way. And so again, what have you found yourself in those settings where you are not with people that have the same life experiences and you still can create that sense of connection? And how did you do it?
It's interesting that we started the conversation with soccer, because I would say like sport and art are the two things that I have seen that are most able to create that sense of connection beyond like language and culture. I love that. Like anywhere I go in the world, I do love that I can pick up a soccer ball and we can play around, and there's like a sense of shared understanding and togetherness that comes from that. And I certainly feel that like people of, regardless of different races, ages, genders, backgrounds, cultures, that, English language is an important one for my art form. But if that is there, the poetry is often a connector and an equalizer of a shared human experience. And I love that. It's one of my favorite things about it. And I think you're right that a lot of people do feel like it's very hard to communicate their experience and very hard to be seen in that way. And yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to be adept at language, because it's very hard to really communicate what's going on for us in real ways. And I think most people struggle to get close. And as a poet in my own just like personal life, I find myself pretty well able to dance through that. And I'm really grateful for that. So that's, to me, the skill I'm most grateful for in my life. It creates the most honesty and intimacy and depth in my relationships. And yeah, it would be really hard to not have that skill for me.
What have you learned as you've honed the craft of poetry and writing poetry? What have you learned that you now see applied in other just general forms of communication that hopefully someone could grasp that and say, oh, cool, I could take that. I could do something with that.
I guess what comes to mind is, I can see two sides of it with metaphor. I guess actually another thing that I'll bring in here is humor as well. In communication, I think when we're in fight mode, like when we're arguing or like we're trying to get something across but not quite being understood, like we're meeting a lot of resistance, I find that like humor is such a beautiful relaxant. Like if we can laugh, where comedians are so brilliant, like if we can laugh about a topic together, I think the defenses go down and we're able to have like a more productive conversation where there's a deeper meeting of what's really happening here. And so I think I would say that actually is one tactic that is less about the poetry and more about storytelling, but that like humor is a really beautiful gift to get through resistance, where it's like if we can laugh about something, we're much closer to seeing eye to eye. And yeah, in terms of my style of writing, I guess there is something similar that like I sometimes will find, actually, like if I'm struggling to get the words right, sometimes I'll just put on some music and just like freestyle nonsense talk or like rap in a voice memo to a friend. And then just instantly, because the medium of it is playful and artistic, it doesn't feel as important that the words be exactly right. And so like there's something in the shifting the nature of the medium or shifting the way of communication to something more playful and artistic that I think also does create a nice opportunity in connection. And that might sound like impossible for someone to do. Be like, what? I can't just pick that up and put on some music and rap to my friend. But like when I do that, for my friend Nacia comes to mind. I sent one to her and then she responded and I was like, hey, it's hard for me to understand you when you're not rapping. Like, what are you saying? I can't understand if you're not rapping. And just sort of messing around with her. And then she was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Eventually she did it and like didn't have to rhyme, just like some music on, just like saying some words, trying to time it. And we can, like we're capable of so much more than we think in that. And even if it's not good, whatever. It's like if it's fun, it's in there, it's creative. It's like the attempt itself is often quite beautiful. So the style of communication, I think, can be more impactful maybe than we think. And we can have a lot of leeway of creatively what that looks like.
So I don't normally ask someone to share something, but if you feel so called, I just think like, again, I'm such a fan of the way that you put words together. And I would love it if people could hear some of that, if there's something that you feel called to share with us.
Hearing how you describe your audience, the one that I would feel called to share is one that like actually doesn't feel so present to the person I am now, but also felt very real to me for a long time as I was wondering about like doing this work. And I have had long struggles with like just self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And I sat next to someone on a plane once, an anthropologist, who said, I asked her like, what's the most interesting thing you've heard about people? And she said that just about everywhere in every culture, everyone is suffering from some form of imposter syndrome. And I thought that was amazing. And I am constantly wondering if I'm good enough to follow my heart, if I'm worthy of pursuing this art, wondering if my wording is worthy, worried I'm not worthy of working on creating beauty. I am constantly wondering if I am creating any beauty, if there's any substance to these fleeting words, anything that really works, anything that changes after people hear my work. And there's been no change as far as the eye is concerned, so I'm concerned that at the end, my life's work won't have been worth anything. I'm afraid the world would be a better place if I replaced the time I spend on stage with walking out into the streets and doing literally anything. Do words matter when they don't make matter? Do ideas need to take matter to matter? Because to make matters worse, I don't want to be out there. I want to be here, sharing words that seem to so very quickly fade. My art doesn't exist in physical, tangible space. It comes and then it goes away until we're left with this. Nothingness, emptiness, consciousness that I so desperately want to lift. But when I look around at this, it won't look any different than when I started, unless we're different than when I started. And we won't look any different as far as the eye is concerned, so I'm concerned that none of this matters. Then again, do we matter? Nothing but this miraculous accumulation of matter, miraculous organization of matter, seeing matter, being matter, breathing matter. We can't actually make matter, but we can make matter matter. We can turn matter into things that matter. We can give matter value. Are these words valuable? Is that measured in dollars and cents? I guess logically that might make sense, but if we were observed by aliens, they'd probably wonder why we spend so much time and energy and money on things that don't matter. They'd be like, why don't you value value for its value? Why not create a world where value is actually built on your values? Planet Earth could be the thing you call heaven with an adjustment to your attitudes. Isn't that a beautiful idea? And isn't it something that an idea can be beautiful? And maybe that's enough. I want so badly for it to be enough. For what I put in hearts and minds and souls to be enough. I feel like I'm hurling stones into this giant pool of consciousness. And I finish each poem with a splash. And for a moment, there's a ripple over this vast pool of thoughts that we've collectively amassed. And then it fades, as ripples do. Without a care for me or you, that stillness is resumed. And as I gaze at this beautiful natural view, can't help but think it looks the same as it did before I threw. And I know the lake has my stones in it now, but if I'm being brutally honest with myself, is that change? Does that matter? And no matter how much time I spend crafting the perfect lines, it won't stop my time on this earth from its inevitable decline. Since birth, I have been slowly dying, losing an arm wrestling match with Father Time. And it might look like I have my shit together as far as the eye is concerned, but I'm concerned that I'm wasting the only thing that matters. That I'll know deep down on my deathbed that it didn't matter, that I'll return to the earth nothing but mere matter without having made any more than a ripple. At least as far as the eye is concerned. And I used to be really kind of crippled by that self-doubt. And I've become much more comfortable with the ripple effect, with the idea that art and our lives create these ripples that touch everybody and everything in their own little ways, making their own little impact out, that I may never see the impact of the art or of my life on the world and on the future, and just like trusting that when it feels so right, as art so often does, and as love so often, and I would argue always is, it's just like that ripple is for the better and higher. And yeah, but it was somewhat torturous to constantly be wondering, like, is it enough? Is it right? Is this the best use of like my skills? And like some of that thinking is valuable, but it also, I think, especially in high achievers, can really just be a cycle where we don't end up doing much of anything, where we're constantly spinning and not actually giving ourselves to the world. And now I value art and expression and love, just, I would say, about over everything.
That's beautiful. Yeah, one of the things I really love about your style is there are people that at a party will get up and walk to the dance floor and then start dancing. And there are people that will dance out of their seats. And you are one of those dance out of your seats guys. You're like, we don't need to have a start and an end. We are just going to flow into poetry. The words just meld. And it's so beautiful. And I think that's why I love your style so much, because there are times where I'm like, wait, are you talking to me now? Is it over? I don't even know what happened. It's so good.
And I love that. I love the blend of life into the art and into life and what's what. And that's very signature to my style too.
Yeah.
I was going to say, as we continue, I'll feel into the topic of conversations, and I'll read one from the book too, but I haven't decided what yet.
Amazing. Yeah. So I was just going to say, I think what you were touching on, this desire to have that impact. I mean, it's so many of us. I mean, the entire show is on this premise of we climb the wrong mountain, right? We have this early dream. That's why I always start the show with that. What do we dream we'd be when we grow up? And then we get there. We're like, shit, was this even really my dream? Was it the externalization of something that I was after? Or was it a feeling? Was it a state of being? Was it the permission to be that I was really after? And it's the thought of, again, throwing those stones and, in the water and just going, does this matter? Does any of this matter? It is like my greatest question all the time is this Einstein quote that either everything means everything or everything means nothing. That torments me to this day, where I'm like, well, what if I don't matter to that person? Then does that mean that the entire fabric of the universe falls apart because nothing matters? Or do I still matter to them and I'm just confused about what mattering even means? So it's cool to hear your contemplation on that. And again, for people that have worked so hard and are, it's this weird inverse of someone who's had so much external success and still feels empty inside or still feels like something's missing. That's a hard place to be. It's like, what is wrong? I must be fundamentally broken because the outside conditions haven't brought that thing yet. Whereas when I've been striving, when I haven't had it, like at least I could blame it on something outside of me. Heavy shares there.
Resonates for sure. And I also I grew up around a very successful father who did not feel successful. Yeah. My dad has won 19 Emmy Awards and was on TV as one of the few voices of when there were 4 channels and reached more people than people reach now with so much fragmentation. And yeah, he just achieved the utmost, so much of close to the 1% of 1% of 1% of success in his field. And he just doesn't feel like it's enough. It's yeah, but everyone doesn't get it. They don't get the these messages that I'm trying. He's a very intense libertarian. He's very zealotous libertarian figure. And he's well, it's the world doesn't get it. My wife doesn't get it. He's people are not converted by my messaging, so it's not enough. And yeah, to watch someone achieve so much by so many metrics and still not feel enough, it's definitely a lot in that regard too.
Do you ever feel like it's a lineage thing, or is it just the nature of humanity?
I think that anthropologist was saying every culture everywhere. And I actually saw a play recently of, I forget the name. It was Sondheim's last play. And I saw it with my girlfriend and my mom. And there was one character who was this revolutionary and, was being a terrorist at the end of it, I would say, by holding a bunch of people hostage at gunpoint. And so by that definition. And there was one piece that was everybody talking about, sort of wondering if their path was the right one and whether their work mattered. And it was does my job matter? Does my job matter? And then to hear that character, the terrorist character, kind of have a similar, does my job matter? Am I doing this? Am I doing for what I believe in effectively? It was really meaningful for me. It was whoa, even that person, having similar human wonderings of like I'm trying my best, but like, is this the way? Like there was something about that really moved me. And I do think it's pretty human to wonder with our limited time and mortality, how are we using that time?
Yeah, I would imagine if we do believe that it's all happening in service of us, that somehow that desire to wonder what we're doing, if it matters, is potentially part of the engine that makes us do things that matter, right? It's like if it's this unachievable state that causes people that have already achieved so much to say, I'm not going to rest on my laurels. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep going bigger. Sucks to be in it, but maybe we all benefit from it in some strange way.
Totally. I mean, and it certainly does seem like, people with deep unresolved trauma and challenges do seem to be those who are like so badly needing to prove to the world that they're worthy and enough that they end up like really pushing a lot and doing a lot of things. In what direction is an interesting question, but like making big splashes and impacts for sure. Yeah, like what an interesting dance and dynamic and balance of that can be.
So what if you today said, you know what, I'm enough. I've done enough. It's all enough. Do you think you'd be able to create still? Do you think you'd be able to create from a different place?
I think I do occupy more of that space now. Like I don't struggle with that in the same way. And I certainly still work through some of like just the insecurity and like there are layers of that thing you just described. But I'd say over the past 4-ish years, like I've really gotten much more to a place of like, don't have to do anything. Like it's okay. Like it's really okay. And what do I want to do? Like what do I want to create? What do I want to put into the world? And I like that place much more. It's much less prolific. It's much less like urgently trying to get people to see this. I used to so badly want everyone to be able to see these videos. And now it's much more of just like, what wants to come? What wants to be shared? What do I want to put out? And what wants to move through me? And how do I be a vessel for that? And yeah, like there's some dissociation from I in that too. Like I am Max. I also have come to associate more with like the thing that looks through all of our eyes than I do with Max. Like I prioritize that thing more than I used to. And I think like that really is the pronoun that I most associate with is that I, and not that Max associates with, that I associate with. And I think from that place, just like trying to look at the world, it's like what wants to happen through me and how do I show up in this, and like what do I want to create without it being out of like unworthiness or a need. That space feels much more peaceful in my system, and I guess we'll see what creatively comes out of that phase. I would imagine less success from that, like by the traditional standards, like that. I don't think that way of thinking is more successful in terms of money and status. I think it's more successful in terms of like peace and what it's created in the world and how it feels to be in that experience. And my compass has shifted much more in that direction.
I hope that that's not entirely accurate, like with the idea of the success piece, right? Like it definitely hurts my heart when I hear, the goal for me as an artist. There's this beautiful quote from Alan Watts where he says, if you take a piece of charcoal and hold it to the page, ask the charcoal how it wants to be expressed on the page, right? That's just amazing to think that, I'm just I'm the vehicle, right? I'm the vessel. I'm the conduit through which this thing is expressing. I love that concept. I still hold in my heart, and maybe this is just blind naivety, I really hope that the more I do that, the more it can be met and welcomed and actually resonate with more people and have some form of greater success. But, by definition, I do imagine I've kind of given up the dream of my art creating money for me or creating wealth for me. But there's always that little part of me that's like, if I could just express it purely enough that my own distortions and bias would be the hell out of the way, it would be the thing that would just light the whole world up. It would just resonate.
I believe that. And like, yeah, but it's so interesting how that money thought creeps in, right? Like, and it's because that money thought is not so aligned with the thing itself. And it's not like money is evil, not any of that. Just like when that's the thought process, it's not the thing you're describing. It's not what does the charcoal want to express. And then with what the charcoal wants to express, then it's like once it's expressed, how is that put out into the world? And then like what does that system look like? And yeah, like I think it's more successful arguably in like it is being what it wants to be. And can you like what does marketing look like with that same mindset? I don't know that I fully figured that out yet. I'm in the process of that. But like that feels like a really interesting question of like, what does that look like to help once the work exists, help it reach the people that it's meant for? And to do that in a way that feels aligned with like, similarly, like how does the charcoal want to be promoted? It's like, does the charcoal want to be like shown to everybody in the world? Or does Nick want to show that charcoal to everybody in the world because Nick wants money? Like what is and then just to stay aligned to that, because the art doesn't really care, I don't think, about the money. And the art doesn't really care about like, I think how many people see it. I think because that thing too, I think especially in our social media culture is a very present of like, did it get the reach? Did this get a lot of likes, engagements, attention? Did like this go viral? Like I think the art cares much more about nestling deeply into people's hearts and souls and meeting people at the right time, influencing in the right moment, like hitting the right person, than it does about numbers. And I think it's the brain that tries to turn that into, it's like, well, if it's more numbers, there's more of a chance of that thing. And it's like, yes, and it's like somehow that mindset doesn't feel aligned. It's like, yes, if it's seen by more people, there's more likelihood that it hits that right person. That's like a very mental mind of like, by the numbers game and this, and here's how we're approaching that, as opposed to like, I don't know, like maybe it's a piece of charcoal wants to be turned into a paper airplane, thrown out of my window, see where it hits, be picked up by that one right person, and then that was exactly the person that it needed to reach. And then that person saw it. They were so inspired. They remembered something about their mother. They called her. She didn't get hit by a bus because she had to fumble for her phone. Like, I think that's art's dimension. And I think the one of more, and just make us money is just not quite it. And it's so easy to go there. Especially for high-achieving people, the mind so quickly wants to go there and rationalizes all sorts of things. So like to try to make it be like, no, but it is. And I think it's not, and like a different consciousness and a different path.
Well, I appreciate that perspective so much, because I think it does lean towards, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs that are artists, right? And they try to bring their creation to their business. They're saying, this is the way I express creation. But talk about a really tough environment to create in, where you are measured on a P&L. You are measured by Glassdoor. You're measured by all these external metrics. And it's like, damn it. I just wanted to make something I was proud of, but instead I am now having to somewhat prostitute my creation in some way. I'm having to, be measured against these things that really aren't my true expression. And it's probably why I've kept my art separate from my business. I think I've actually had to say, like, my business is the space that I go to play a particular game that has a particular set of rules and outcomes. But my art, if I can have the courage to do it, would be to express it for that, knowing that maybe one person likes it only. This show is that for me. I said I'd never monetize the podcast, because then I'd have to tell certain stories and I'd have to steer it in a certain direction. I don't care if one person listens to it and is inspired, that's always enough. And I've tried to quit the show now 5 times, and one email would come through from someone that I didn't expect saying, hey, thank you for that particular episode that I called my mom, or something weird like that. Right. So I very much appreciate that perspective. And I think there is a courage, there's a beauty in it of, I just want this to be whatever it's going to be. And the fact that I get to be a witness to it, I'm the one person who gets to see it. That's pretty cool. That is really cool. So,
and sometimes,
thank you for that reminder.
As the creator, right? Like sometimes the person, like, and even if you're mentally trying to promote it or put it out, sometimes still that one person it was made for, or that needed this process, was you the creator of it. And like, that's its own process too. It feels like art is just like connected to a divine process in that way, where like you don't know who it's for, and sometimes it's for you and sometimes it's for another, and all of that is beautiful. You matter, you're part of it too. And it's so tricky with entrepreneurship. It's like, like what is entrepreneurship? Like the business, like, because is it about making money? Like in a lot of ways, entrepreneurship, like starting a business It's like a thing that makes money. Like I don't know. There's probably better definitions than that. It's what I think of when I think of a business. And it's like versus like people who are making things where it's like, no, like I wanted to make them. And then it's like, if business is not the primary piece of that, it's like hard when it takes a lot of people to make the thing and I need to keep everybody paid and there's that culture of it. And then, but like when we are measured on P&L, then we're not doing art, right? Like it's like, even if we're calling our entrepreneurship or our business our art, if we're letting the P&L be the thing that is driving, like even like a significant driving force, it's hard for me to classify that in the same category as art.
Yeah, what comes up for me as you say that is, in the business world, we talk about first movers, right? Like the first mover is really the one that scales it, makes a lot of money at it. They're like the innovative one that it's like, someone will do it better. Second or third will figure it out. And there's always this like, don't be that person. But it's like, actually, if your goal was to create something in the world and you were the first one to come out with it and then someone else ran with it and took it to its complete expression, then you're just as critical. You're critical to the process. You didn't get the payoff. You didn't necessarily get the credit and all the benefits, but none of that would have happened if it weren't for you. So it is an interesting way to look at, if I treat my business like art, what would I measure it by? And like aviation is also another crazy example, because since 1903, Wright brothers, a friend of mine told me a story. I don't know how true this is, but I was told that aviation since 1903 has been a net loss, which means that my industry is a gift to humanity, which means that as a business, it's a terrible idea. We always say this, it's a terrible business to be in if you're valuing time to profit. You put a lot of time in, there's a lot of uncertainty, it's hard to scale it. But if you're after a calling and you're trying to participate in one of the most aspirational and inspirational acts of humanity, come fly, like come do aviation, come connect the world, come look at the ripples that we create in our industry of flying someone to somewhere else, someone who chased a love somewhere, someone who's connecting with their family. If we don't measure it by the P&L, it's quite an extraordinary piece of creation.
Absolutely. Literally making people fly. It's not hard to draw the artistic line on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for the perspective on that. That's really cool. And I kind of brings me to the space of, is there anything else you would feel called to share before I ask you our final question?
Yeah. Let's see what wants to come. Well, first we can play with it in this regard. Tell me when to stop.
Okay. Stop.
I don't like that one. Do it again.
Okay. Go. Stop.
Oh, this is nice. It's called Eggshells. We tread so lightly to preserve the integrity of garbage. Delicate, sure. And once broken, please show me the tragedy. Show me what's worth your shrinking. I'd rather you step with power, with confidence in your being, regardless of what's beneath your feet. Tiptoeing is a dance that implies we don't belong here, that we're not welcome, that the fullness of our presence couldn't be handled, lest we break these eggshells. Oh, the consequences, these eggshells that become smaller eggshells, perhaps a tinge of pain now, less likely to cause pain later, less in the way of future footsteps. Can I get you some shoes? A broom? The confidence to break that which is too small for you? Any will do. Never mind these distractions, love. Breakfast smells delicious. Shall we eat?
Beautiful. Yeah, there's some good stuff in there, man. There's like that line of like, rather than that someone would walk. I don't know what the word was, but strong. Like it's the amount in my life I've tiptoed around wishing I didn't make waves in the pool. I talk about that a lot. Like if I could be a ghost, if I could be invisible in so many moments in my life, because God forbid I leave a little bit of dirt behind or I create some waves. So I hope anyone listening hears the invitation in that of like, it's okay, we're going to break some shit.
Yeah. And then also, and I'll speak briefly about this, of like in that, because so much of the creative spirit of what we've talked about is that for me, this book is like when I'm performing, when I'm doing shows, I get up there, I'm sharing things that I'm like, this, I want you to have this. I'm so excited to give you this work, this piece, like with that delivery. And I'm like, oh, so I know how that's going to be received. Like I've done that enough now that I get the reaction. I know what I'm getting. This is basically a collection of things that have sat in my notepads for years that I'm like, these have value. Like, there's good stuff in here. Do I get up on stage and want to shout these? No, but like, there's stuff, and some of it doesn't quite feel right or not quite completed, but like there's tidbits of goodness in here, and it's very much in the spirit of like, I don't know who these things in my notepad are for. Like, I don't know where they belong. Like, I don't know how they artistically reach the thing that they are meant to reach, but I know that I don't want them just sitting here in my notepad. So it's like, it's a collection of like over the years that I've called myself a poet. Just like some written things where I'm like, well, I don't know where this goes, but like I kind of like it. And it's some of it is like vulnerable and love poems and stories to past and present of like loves. But ultimately, like, it just really was a much more vulnerable expression, because this is not like work that I'm like, I'm so confident you're going to love all these poems. I'm like, but I think there's something in here that someone like it just might hit people at that right moment. And I don't want to let my art just sit and fester. And that's what was sort of inspired to make this book. In case that concept is inspiring to anybody, to share your own creations that might be sitting. And actually the launch event that you were in Mexico for was in that spirit. It was like, okay, artists come in, share works that like you don't normally share, that like you have sitting where you're kind of like, I don't know about this one. Is this really like, I don't know what to do with it. And then as people would do that, like there were these beautiful works that were shared that like artists for whatever reason don't necessarily feel like is the it or the one that they build their brand around, but like there's beauty in there. And so yeah, that's really the spirit of this book, and I'm glad it exists now. And yeah, it's like, it also feels good in that poem, I guess, about art comes and it goes away. It's also just like nice to hold. It's like hold a thing that I made for me, because I'm so often doing these ephemeral theater shows or videos that don't have a tangible thing. So I like that I'm holding it.
Very cool. And it's called, what is it? Love and Existential Musings?
Yeah, Love and Existential Musing.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes too, for people to pick up a copy, and hopefully one of those things may be for you, right? One of those poems may have just been looking for you to listen to it, and it'll be the thing that shifts something.
That's the idea. I hope so.
Yeah. So closing question is, what's your dream beyond? What do you dream about?
So interesting, because I have recently begun a relationship with the love of my life. And yeah, like I'm living that dream of just, it's a love that I have dreamed of for so long. And it's so funny to be like, what even else is there to dream of now that this dream is reality and more beautiful than I could have dreamed? And so it's just like, there is a part of me that's like, how could I want anything more? It's just like, how could I? And it's like, do I? And it's like, I even notice myself having to reach for another dream, to be like, something else? Okay, let's try to find another thing that I could want beyond this. And I guess that would be, I want people to feel expressed and loved for exactly who they are. That's a dream.
Well, both of those are beautiful dreams.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. And oh man, there was a lot of good stuff in there. I'll say that the thing that has been just circling in my brain is really just this concept of, for someone who's feeling unfulfilled in their expression, creation, or whatever they're making, it may be worth unburdening some aspect of your creation from the measures that aren't your measures, from the P&Ls, from the money side, and it's just making to make, create to create. I just think this was such a great reminder of that.
It's actually making me think of, like, how cool would it be? And like, this is what social media isn't. It pretends to be, but isn't. It's like, how cool would it be if artists could submit their art to this sort of like AI type algorithm that was been like, I've made a thing. I am offloading the how do I promote this? Where does this go? To this algorithm. And this algorithm's job is to deliver art to those who would find it most meaningful, who like where it would meet people on their journey in these serendipitous and magic and loving ways. Like, how cool would that be of a use of technology and intelligence, of like, where then if okay, we feel unsure, like of this thing here, and let me put it off into the machine and let it do its thing. And what's funny is, as I say it out loud, like that's what life is. Life is that algorithm. There is no artificial one that would make it any better. But for it to reach people, it has to be out in some capacity. And I am a big fan of our listening to how does it want to be shared. Is it social media? Not everything, I bet. Is it to gather some friends in a room and like show them something? Is it to text one person? Is it to put it in a box and bury it in a yard and hope that somebody digs it up? Is it like the paper airplane? I love the idea of getting creative about how different pieces want to be shared.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And again, even your jump from an AI that would line up the art you needed in the moment with like, no, that's exactly what life is. It's a series of crazy happenings outside of ourselves that are just a perfect expression of the emotional moment we're in. Well, with that, if you are as moved as I am by Max's art and his thoughts, go check out his book, pick up a copy, Love and Existential Musings. You could also check out his website. Max, if you have anything else you want to share, we'll put all that in the show notes.
Cool. Yeah, wordsthatmove.com has the book, has a special, that's a good hub for all of my stuff. And yeah, thanks. This was really fun, Nick. It was good to chat with you, good to reconnect and see you. And I hope for more soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.